This is part four of a series that I'm doing on AI and automation integration and managing the change around adopting new technology. So, if you're seeing me for the first time, you may think, well, what qualifies you to even have this conversation? Every time you turn around, you're probably seeing a new expert on social media and the different platforms. And what qualifies me, to have this conversation with you is I have not just a decade of experience in just installing automation and workflows within businesses, but also I have 16 years of actual leadership experience where I've led companies through change. Some of the changes I initiated, and some of the changes I was tasked with carrying out because that's what my bosses wanted. So I was responsible for making sure those changes happened. I'm not someone who's just talking about, the latest AI tool because when we talk about AI integration, it's not a tool, it's about systems. So if you missed the other episodes in this series, you definitely want to go back and check those out. In the first episode, I talked about some of the changes that I'm seeing happening all around us, right? These are changes in the way we get our medical care, how we access medication, how we shop. Technology is all around us. And as a society, we have to eventually adapt to those changes, even though we may not agree with everything. And even though all of those changes, without getting into a debate about whether those changes are good or bad, AI in particular is the direction we're headed, where AI is going to be the front seat of every conversation. We're seeing it with companies like Instacart and Verizon. You apply for a job. Guess who's screening your application, your resume, and your cover letter? It's AI. So AI is going to be interwoven in every aspect of our lives. And all we have to do is just look around. So that was the first part of the series. In the second part, I started to cover my proprietary method of AI integration and managing the change around wide scale, large scale technology adoption. The first part is reveal. As I mentioned in the episode, it's a step that a lot of companies skip. They learn about a particular AI tool or capability and they instantly say, well, I want to integrate that or I want to, I want to use that in my company without ever really doing a deep dive assessment, which is what reveal means. Reveal the problem. What problem are you trying to solve? They don't really do a deep dive assessment and look at what the problems are. And so what ends up happening is they install something that may not be the solution, for what their company is experiencing. So the second letter in the RISE method is I, and that's identify the fix. And we have to identify the fix before we have a software tool in mind or before we have a system in mind. What is the actual solution for what the problem is? And when we talk about the problems, maybe you're experiencing six different problems that's causing bottlenecks in your company. Your goal as a leader is not to fix all six or fix every problem that you detected when you did the assessment. Your goal is to find the biggest bottleneck in your company. What's costing you the most time lost with productivity? What's costing you the most revenue? And that is what you fix first. I can't tell you how often I see a lot of companies have a failure when it comes down to implementing change in their company because they ram too many changes down their team's throats too fast and too furious, and they're not thinking through, what the problems are. Did the solution that I choose actually, is it going to fix the problem? And is it the most significant thing we need to focus on right now? Your changes need to be implemented in phases, not all at once. It overwhelms the team. They'll never ever adopt the change, especially technology in that way. So today we're talking about S of RISE, and that is simplify implementation. And you've probably seen this play out, whether it's with your company or maybe you've seen someone else talk about this in their company where leadership identifies this new system. It's so amazing, right? Whether it's AI, whether it's something else, new software, and it's going to change how the team works. It's going to make their lives so much better. And then they set aside, time for this training. Yeah, employees come, they attend, they're attentive, they're listening, they're taking notes, right? And the next thing you know, you look at the dashboard, you look at your KPIs, and it turns out within a matter of a couple of months, that team that was so attentive in training, that team that took diligent notes in training, never adopted the change. And you're sitting wondering why. And I can tell you it probably wasn't because, the change that you wanted to implement wasn't a good change. It also probably wasn't because they were resistant and leading some rebellion against the change. But rather, it had more to do with the fact that, especially as it relates to technology, is that the change that took place benefited leadership. It was a problem that leadership identified and not something that was really going to make the everyday employee experience better. It's not a solution that's going to fix a problem that employees were experiencing or that they even identified was an issue. When you have the misalignment between what leadership views as a problem and what employees view as a problem, there's going to be that integration and adoption gap. Sure, they'll show up to the training, they'll take notes, they'll try their best, to implement this new change, but at the end of the day, unless it's a change that somehow benefits them, it's going to fall short when it comes down to adoption. I say that because I have 16 years of management experience, and a lot of the changes over the course of those 16 years, some of them I initiated, and some went very good. Some did not go so well, especially in the beginning stages of my management career. I had some real flops when it came down to implementation. And while I initiated some of the changes, there were also changes that my bosses wanted, and I was tasked with getting the employees on board to adopt the changes that I was never even asked to be a part of in terms of the rollout or how it would be implemented. And just like when I initiated changes, yes, some of those projects went well and others went by the wayside because you have to learn the people part of change. Whether you're trying to integrate technology or, behavior, any type of change, you have to understand the people part of change. Just because you say you want something changed, you give people a step-by-step blueprint for the change, you tell them what you want, doesn't mean that people are going to adopt that change. So you have to simplify the implementation part of that change. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about in this episode. So when we think about simplifying the change, it's not dumbing down the change. We're not going to speak down to the team or treat them like they're incapable of understanding what we're trying to achieve as a company or as a leader. What we are doing is simplifying the process, removing the complexity. I've been a part of some of the changes that were way too complex. And, for where the employees are, or the leadership decided they were going to implement all the different changes. And the one thing you don't want to do is have so much change going on in your business and in your company that it overwhelms your employees. And when that happens, it's too much for them to absorb, and eventually they break down and nothing gets adopted. So remember when I talked about the reveal, reveal the issues, the problems. What are you trying to fix? The goal is to come up with one problem that you need to fix. What's causing the most issues in your company? Whether that issue is productivity, whether that issue is, revenue loss. What's causing the biggest issue so that you can have one solution that's going to fix it. And that way you establish a plan, a phased plan where, you're not going to herd everyone in like cattle to go through this training and think like, voila, they're just going to adopt the change. Change has to happen in phases. So when we're building out the technology, the question at the center of our minds needs to be not what does this technology do? It is what specific problem does this technology solve for the person who has to use it every single day. When technology integration goes wrong, it's because the focus is more about what the technology can do. And when you focus on what the technology can do, you lose sight of what does the person that's actually responsible for adopting this technology and using it in their work every single day. And when we focus more on what the technology can do instead of what problem this solves for the person that has to use it every single day, there's a misalignment because and as a result of that misalignment, people aren't excited to use it because it's not doing anything for them. It's just creating an extra layer of work. And I saw that in my own management career where I was tasked with implementing a certain technology that was supposed to merge everything together. And I was brought in the middle of this project, the middle of this integration, and it was a mess. It was a nightmare. They were trying to pass off the responsibility for fixing the nightmare on me, that I was somehow going to come in as a new employee, wave a magic wand, and fix all of the problems and everything they had screwed up related to this software integration. There were several problems with the software. First off, no one asked the employees about the software integration needs. It was a software that the company did not need. It did nothing for the company. And I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to take three different databases and merge it into one. I understood that. But the problem with the whole integration process is, there was a phased go live in terms of like, the mapping out of the software and all of that, but there was no phased implementation and no for the employees and no inclusion of the actual people that were actually going to be tasked with using the database every day involved in this planning process. So as a result, no one used it. You would run reports and no one was using it. And when I came on board, the first thing I did is I sat down with the team and I asked them, I know you all have been in the process of using this new tech, this new system, but no one's using it, right? No one's using it. And I'm just, I'm new, I'm trying to gain an understanding about why no one's using it. And they gave me an earful. No one had ever sat down and asked them why they weren't using it. The system actually did not make their lives easier. It required them to enter into the new system as well as the other old systems they were entering data into because the systems never talked to each other. No one was fixing it. No one halted integration until that problem was fixed. I don't know if that was ever a promise that the software company made that the systems would talk to one another, but that should have been fixed first before they brought me in, before they implemented it and required the team to use it. So if someone brings in a system and they tell you that it's going to make your life easier, but in the reality, it triples your workload, no one's using that. No one's using it. So no wonder the technology or software adoption failed. And worse, when it was failing, they knew it was failing. They still never went to the employees and asked, why aren't you using the software? I was just like, I could not understand it. They would have had so much clarity if they had just sat down. And I say they, meaning my bosses, if they had just sat down and talked to the team about what the issues were and and have a test period and not pay tens and thousands of dollars to a software company that couldn't produce what was needed for the company. So I've seen a lot of great change happened around technology. And I've been a part of those changes, great things happening where I integrated technology successfully when it was something that I wanted to integrate. And I was personally involved from the beginning stages. But I've also seen some epic failures like the one I just described to you. You have to include employees for to make sure, number one, the solution you're proposing is actually a solution for a problem that they're experiencing. Number two, you're including them in the process. You're taking the complexity out of what it means to integrate this technology, and you're respecting the fact that they are knowledgeable. They have a lot of institutional knowledge, and in a lot of cases, they have they're professionals. They have, such a high skill level for the role that they're in. And technology integration can be simplified if we just look at the fact of, make it more about what is this technology going to do for the person that's going to be using it every day. And when what the employees need and what leadership wants doesn't align, it's a recipe for disaster in terms of like integrating anything, any change in your company. When we talk about simplifying the process, and for that to be done well, everything you build needs to map and link to what the employees are doing on a daily basis. And when we talk about AI integration, you want to eliminate some of the manual tasks that they're doing. You want to somehow make their life easier. So you have to know that first, and that's why the revealing of the problem is so important and why the identifying the fix is so important. Another thing I talked about in revealing the problem is, mapping out what everyone does so you know how the work intersects. Because as a leader, you think you know what's happening and what every task is, but you can't possibly know because you're busy with your leadership role and your responsibilities as a leader. You may know that in a general sense how your company operates, but the people that are experts at the day-to-day tasks that support your company, is your team. And you have to really sit and map things out so that you actually make that connection. So before you finalize any technology decisions or any AI integration decisions, do your assessment. Do the reveal stage. Reveal what the problems are, what the bottlenecks are. Then you identify a solution that fixes one of the problems because you may have several. And don't overwhelm the team trying to fix everything. And make sure you remove the complexity out of the process so that you're respecting their expertise, but you're also getting their input and their feedback so that you create systems that they'll actually use and they'll actually be excited about because they're making the connection to their daily work and the daily tasks that they have to perform and not something that's simply what leadership wants. When you do that, you're going to see a difference in the team's attitude toward the change and also in their motivation to actually adopt the very changes you're trying to implement. So, in the next episode, what I want to focus on is the final stage of the RISE process. So, we talked about the reveal, we talked about identify the fix, simplifying the implementation. The next phase is evaluate and optimize. And that's where you make sure, hey, is what we implemented working? Is it being adopted? What are the changes? Because what a lot of companies do, they decide on the change, they set a go live date, and then they have the training, and that's it. They want everyone to have adopted the technology, but you have to have this step after that, and that's the evaluate and optimize step. If you are responsible for technology decisions in your company and you want a clear picture of where to start, or maybe you're in the middle of an AI integration and you are experiencing issues, I offer a free, no obligation, 20-minute integration readiness call. And it's basically a conversation where we'll talk about where you are now in your integration process, what you're trying to achieve, and I'll give you some next steps to get you there. And you will leave that conversation with a clearer picture about where your organization stands and the next steps, to move you forward in your AI integration goals. So if you want to take advantage of my offer, you can head over to gemstoneconsultingservices.com/schedule. And that's gemstoneconsultingservices.com/schedule. Or you could click the link in the show notes or the description, depending on where you're watching or listening to this episode. So, with that said, it's a wrap, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.